La séance. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro.
Hearing is open. Welcome to meeting number 20 of the Standing Committee of the House of Commons on Veteran Affairs. Before starting, I would like to make sure that you've all received the correspondence that was sent to you in both official languages and by Mr. McKnight. So I want to make sure that you've all received it. I see people nodding. So, pursuant to the motion adopted on September 18th, 2025, the committee is meeting as part of its study on barriers to entrepreneurship among veterans. Today's meeting is being held in a hybrid format in accordance with the rules of procedure.
Avant de poursuivre, j'aimerais demander à tous les participants en personne de consulter les lignes directrices qui se retrouvent sur la carte devant vous, sur la table. C'est afin de prévenir les incidents audio et les effets d'arsène et protéger la santé et sécurité de tous les participants, incluant les interprètes. Vous verrez aussi un code QR sur la carte qui est devant vous, qui vous mènera à une vidéo de sensibilisation. Quelques commentaires pour nos témoins et membres du comité. Veuillez attendre que je vous nomme avant de prendre la parole. Pour ceux qui sont en vidéoconférence, veuillez cliquer sur l'icône du microphone pour activer votre microphone et n'oubliez pas de vous mettre en sourdine lorsque vous ne parlez pas. Pour ceux qui sont sur Zoom, au bas de votre écran, vous pouvez sélectionner le canal approprié pour l'interprétation, que ce soit le parquet, le français ou l'anglais. Pour ceux qui sont dans la salle, utilisez l'oreillette et sélectionnez le canal désiré. J'aimerais vous rappeler que tous les commentaires doivent passer par la présidence.
For members present in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For MPs, I don't think we have any MPs on Zoom. So,
for this first hour, from Doug House Brewing Company Limited, Mr. Richard McNish, co-owner, who's here in person. And we have, by video conference, from the Green Army Coffee, Mr. Jody Mittick, founder, who is with us. It's really a pleasure to welcome both of you. Thank you for joining us today. You will all, each of you will have 5 minutes to give your opening remarks, and I say 5 minutes, please. We will then proceed to a series of questions with the members of the committee. And just to be very candid, sometimes our members like to extend their time, and I have to interrupt. So I'm also the clock keeper. So I apologize in advance if I interrupt you. Members knows their time and their allocated perspective. So, Mr. McNish, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, honourable members of the committee. I thank you for this opportunity to appear before you as part of the study. My name is Richard McNish. I appear before you as a veteran with nearly 32 years of distinguished service in the Canadian Armed Forces. Over that time, I served in multiple trades and leadership roles, including operational deployments, command-level responsibilities, and I was entrusted with the management of significant public resources and large publicly funded budgets. I raise not to provide a resume, but to establish context. Veterans are trained in financial stewardship, accountability, and disciplined risk management. Those skills are not theoretical. They're applied under scrutiny with real consequences over long careers. I now speak from lived experiences transitioning the Ottawa Valley to include my town of Petawawa, one of Canada's most military-connected communities. In regions like ours, the effectiveness of Veteran Affairs Canada policy is not abstract. It directly affects veterans, families, and local economies. For many veterans, entrepreneurship is not an alternative to a transition, it is the transition. Veterans bring leadership, planning discipline, regulatory compliance experience, and risk controls developed through service. These competencies align directly with business ownership. However, VAC's current framework remains primarily oriented towards traditional wage-based employment. As a result, veterans pursuing entrepreneurship often encounter systemic barriers rather than structured support. First, employment-centric program design. VAC continues to define successful transition largely through employment outcomes. Entrepreneurship is often treated as higher risk or less suitable, rather than legitimate and frequently therapeutic pathway. Veterans proposing self-employment are often required to justify their choice in ways not expected of those pursuing conventional employment. This approach does not reflect the diversity of post-service careers, nor does it fully leverage the skills veterans bring with them. Second, funding and benefit misalignment. Entrepreneurship requires upfront investment and timely decision-making. VAC funding models, generally reimbursement-based and procedurally slow, are misaligned with startup realities such as leasing property, purchasing equipment, and meeting regulatory requirements. Veterans also face uncertainty around how early-stage business income interacts with income replacement benefits. The lack of clear, consistent guidance creates risk aversion and discourages veterans from pursuing otherwise viable enterprises. Third, inconsistent decision-making capacity. VAC case managers do essential work and under significant pressures. However, evaluating entrepreneurship requires specific expertise that is not uniformly available. Veterans consistently report different outcomes depending on individual familiarity with business concepts, creating uncertainty, delays, and loss of confidence in the system. From lived experience in Petawawa and the Ottawa Valley, our veteran-owned brewery and small businesses alike illustrate both the opportunity and the challenge. These enterprises are capital-intensive, highly regulated, and deeply community-focused. They create local employment, contribute to municipal tax bases, and serve as informal hubs for veteran connection and peer support. Yet these broader social and economic benefits are not reflected in current VAC assessment models. Veterans with service-related physical or mental health conditions face additional barriers as entrepreneurship timelines rarely align with VAC's time-limited transition supports. Finally, the administrative burden of managing a startup alongside VAC compliance requirements can be overwhelming, particularly for veterans living with operational stress injuries. Based on lived experience, command-level responsibilities, and financial stewardship, I respectfully offer 5 recommendations for the committee to consider. First, formally recognize entrepreneurship as legitimate and equal transition and rehabilitation outcome within VAC policy. Second, establish a dedicated veteran entrepreneurship program, including startup-appropriate funding, clear income benefit interaction guidance, and access to veteran-specific mentorship. Third, enhance entrepreneurship literacy within VAC through targeted training or the integration of external business expertise into decision-making. And fourth, finally, provide greater flexibility in transition timelines, particularly for veterans with service-related disabilities. And finally, reduce administrative burden by aligning VAC processes with the operational realities of small businesses. Veteran entrepreneurship represents an opportunity, not a liability. In communities like Petawawa, veterans are already contributing as employers, innovators, and community leaders, often despite the system, not because of it. With modernized policy and targeted support, VAC can enable these outcomes while maintaining accountability and responsible stewardship of public funds. I thank you for your consideration, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNish. We will now have Mr. Mittick for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good to see you again. It's been a while. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody Mittick. I'd like to start off by thanking everyone for this opportunity to speak today. Special thank you to Eric Glavin for his help making sure I appeared today, despite some communication issues. I'm also proud to realize my own MP, Marie-France Lalonde, is chair of the committee, so a hearty hello to her and to all committee members. Thank you for your time today. And a last hello to MP Blake Richard, who I've met several times and last saw him in the summer when I received the King's Coronation Medal from Bob Zimmer for my work with advocating for veterans. My story begins in 1994 when I enlisted in the reserves as a member of the Lawrence Scots Regiment in Brampton, Ontario as an infanteer. I transferred to the regular army and joined the 1st Battalion of the Royal Canadian Regiment in 1997. My regular army career didn't have the best start due to some poor decisions on my part, but once I got the hang of regular army life, I did well and I enjoyed it. I deployed first to Kosovo in 1999 as a section light machine gunner in a 60mm mortar crew. My next tour was to Kabul in 2003 as close protection and driver for the officers in our headquarters and signals company located at the Kabul airport. Between Kosovo and Kabul, I was able to complete my signals, recon, or recce qualifications. And on 9/11, the terrorist attack happened while I was doing my basic sniper course in September 2001. After Kabul, I continued training and achieved my Sniper Det Commander qualification and Master Sniper qualification. This led to my deployment as a Sniper Detachment Commander in 2006 with 1RCR in Kandahar. On January 11th, 2007, I was unlucky enough to step on an IED, which cost me both feet below the knee, but I was lucky enough that none of my team was hurt and I managed to survive, although I left some meat, blood, and bone in the Afghan soil forever. Since then, I've had many adventures, including, but not limited to, having two amazing daughters, Ayla and Kira, 17 and 14. I managed to appear on season 1 of The Amazing Race, but I placed second. I ran successfully for the Ottawa City Council in 2014 and served as the Innes Ward Councillor, Ward 2, proudly. I had to step away in 2018 due to personal circumstances. Mary France at the time was my MPP. I also released 2 books, Unflinching, The Making of a Canadian Sniper, an autobiography, and Everyday Heroes, a collection of war stories between now and World War II. I also worked briefly at Veterans Affairs while General Natinchuk was the second in command there during the pandemic. Between 2018 and 2022, I focused on my health and my kids and looking for a way to make a living and occupy myself for the next 25 years. I decided after a few false starts in other areas to focus on developing my own brand and founded Green Army Coffee in the summer of 2022. Green Army Coffee, or just Green Army, is focused on representing anyone who wears green for a living. I don't care what unit you're with or what qualifications you have or don't have. If you're a green collar, as I like to say, Green Army Coffee is your brand. I like to say that if you're overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated, Green Army Coffee is here for you. Our mission is to provide a culturally appropriate and safe setting for those in uniform, veterans, and their families and supporters, using the best coffee available and a positive attitude with emphasis on rugged self-reliance, accountability, teamwork, and shared social values. I'd always planned to start my own business after my career was over. I'd always assumed that I'd do at least 25 years and retire with a half-decent pension. Getting wounded ruined and destroyed all those plans. Unfortunately, and personally enraging, Parliament implemented the extremely flawed and short-sighted new Veterans Charter on May 5th, 2005, under Prime Minister Martin, effectively reducing financial compensation for my type of injuries from roughly $3.4 million plus over a lifetime to a simple one-time payment of $250,000. Outrageous and, in my opinion, a massive insult to anyone who goes into combat for a living. I don't say these things lightly, nor for shock effect. I'm simply telling you my personal feelings and opinion about the circumstances I find myself in. Lastly, I would put that the current process and procedures I've encountered with Veterans Affairs Canada in regards to veterans seeking employment or entrepreneurship puzzling and counterintuitive. I don't recall what it's called, but placing what amounts to be roughly a $20,000 tax on anyone seeking to improve their income or start a personal business. With that, I'd like to close and thank you for my time to address you and happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitic. It's a pleasure to see you again also. We will now begin our first round. Each member will have 6 minutes. We will be starting with Mr. Richards for 6 minutes.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you to both of you, obviously, first of all, for your service to our country and for the contributions today and the examples you set for your fellow veterans. Mr. McNish, I'm a little disappointed you didn't bring us any samples, but I do want to ask you some questions about your business and some of the barriers that you might face. But just before I do that, I actually want to turn Mr. Middick. You, right at the very end of your opening remarks, you mentioned what you call essentially a $20,000 tax on people looking to earn an income, on veterans looking to earn an income or start a business. I know what you're talking about when you said that, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain that a little bit more, just for the benefit. Like, obviously, when this report is written, I think this needs to be included in it personally, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to explain that more in your own words so that it's clear to everybody what you were referring to there.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. So I'm not 100% on all the terms. They've changed a lot over the last 20 years, but I believe it's the income replacement benefit. The benefit part is weird to me. It's a compensation. It's not a benefit. So last year I spent roughly 12 months not receiving my IRB because while talking to my case manager, had mentioned, I have these books. I had also podcasts, and I had started the Green Army brand, and I mentioned it to my case manager, and also my personal life, my personal finances, my taxes, my administration was still quite jumbled. And I let them know, and I, it's not like I'm making any money on the company. But at this point, I think I've only lost about $500. All that to say that this $20,000 limit seemed to be all the system cared about. For lack of a piece of paper from the CRA saying Jody only made this or didn't make that, so you don't, the administrative side of Veterans Affairs decided that it was a better to cut me off and seek these administrative forms after they'd cut me off. And of course, they had warned me, but I assumed, because I was talking to them, it wouldn't happen. And it happened, and I resisted quite a bit. I think I chatted with you about it briefly, simply because, in my opinion, this shouldn't happen to anyone ever in my position, because first of all, it's $20,000 that I'm relying on. And, the confusion, is that, if I'm reporting that I'm making any money, Veterans Affairs, this part of Veterans Affairs, their concern is, am I making too much money, in their opinion? I'm not sure where this came from. I'm not sure who decided it was a good idea. But it was incredibly frustrating. It was incredibly disappointing. It caused me a massive rift in my trust with Veterans Affairs and the outcomes there that the system is seeking. Because there's nowhere in my life where this helped. This type of thing doesn't help. And just as an aside, anyone that I speak with in the veterans community, this $20,000 thing comes up all the time as a reason to stay where they are or not seek any improvement, because they worry that, because $20,000 is significant. And even if I'm making an extra amount of money, I'm relying on this income for now.
Right.
And I understand there are all kinds of arbitrary definitions within there about why you can have certain amounts and why you cannot. But this particular process is probably the biggest barrier I've encountered. I can't speak for Bruce or anyone else, but it seems to me it was a massive overreach and completely unnecessary. And again, like I said, counter to the outcomes VAC claims it wants for me.
Exactly. I think that last point is really the important one, right? Like, this is a benefit that you and other veterans have earned through your service to the country, and the last thing that the government should be doing is discouraging you from trying to contribute to your country in other ways now that you're a private citizen, right? Whether that's starting a business, whether that's gaining employment income. The last thing we should be doing is discouraging that by taking something away from you that you've earned, frankly. So thank you for highlighting that. I guess, I don't know what we've got for time. 1 minute. Okay. Well, a very brief period of time. I wanted to ask you both. I'll start with you, though, Mr. McNish, because you haven't had the chance. Can you just tell us what your experiences have been with Veterans Affairs in terms of, your benefits, starting a business, any issues that you've encountered personally that you'd like to share with this committee? And if there's time, Mr. Middick as well.
Well, very briefly, I was lucky. I started my business before I actually released. I released on my own terms, so I wasn't medically released. However, as Mr. Middick just stated, once I got into the Veteran Affairs system, I was very open and very forward about the fact that I had a business with my family, my son, who's a current serving member. And I didn't have the same frictions that Jody had. However, when it came to the rehabilitation part and all the rest of it, the fact that I had a business already and wanted to focus on that was secondary to me going to university in Ottawa for 4 years to become an engineer in my mid-50s. That made absolutely zero sense, to the point now that it's sorted itself out, but that where's
I'm
the
so
logic?
sorry,
Why are you
Mr.
discouraging me
Richards.
from
I'm
being
going to
an
have to interrupt you. As I mentioned, I am the clock keeper. I apologize, Mr. McNish. And Jody, I'm sure Mr. Mittick will come back to you. I'm very certain of that. I would like to now, for 6 minutes, Mr. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to both of our guests for being with us today and for your service. I'm going to stay with Mr. McNish. We're just in the second meeting of this study, but there's already some recurring themes emerging. We heard quite a bit at the last meeting about challenges in accessing capital, and another thing that struck me from what we heard at the last meeting that I found quite interesting is the difference between the veteran population and everyone else when it comes to appetite for risk. So I want to start with that second one, because you outlined in your opening remarks that your experience in the armed forces taught you about risk management. That was the one thing that you specifically referenced. The context in which we heard about the appetite for risk is that you take someone who has made a conscious decision and spent a good part of his life in an unlimited liability situation. They're okay with risk. They get it. So I'd be interested in your perspectives and your comments around veterans distinguishing themselves from the rest of society in terms of appetite for risk and ability to manage it.
Thank you for that. Personally, I believe that veterans and those with training within the Canadian Armed Forces, which does a very good job of teaching risk management, being able to analyze, identify, and project what the potential risks are, and then be able to, through that assessment, mitigate them so that for the average citizen, something that may look overwhelming for a well-trained, skilled military member or former member, it's not as daunting or as fearful in general, because we've faced it within our own country, overseas, with the eye of the enemy, whatever it is, it's something that you've experienced and can fall back on.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's talk about access to capital for a minute. You indicated that you started your business in 2020, I believe?
2019.
2019, okay, and shortly after the pandemic hit, which was a really good time to be in the beer business. You disagree with that?
It had its pros and cons, yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean it to be a joke.
No.
I know there were at least a couple of sectors that really benefited during the pandemic. Alcohol was one, video games was another, and I'm sure there's a longer list than that. But I guess my question to you is around access to capital. Did you have challenges accessing capital for what you call a nano brewery? And do you feel that any of those challenges, if they existed, were connected or were distinguishable because of your status as someone reinventing themselves after so many years in the military?
Well, we bootstrapped everything from the beginning, my son and I. like I said, I was still earning a paycheck twice a month at that point. So there was our own capital invested, and that we got a small line of credit from a credit union that we were able to access based on our own personal finances. There is no identifiable system out there that says we'll give to veterans, or this is a veteran funding program. Within, which kind of burns my soul, is that on the Veterans Affairs website currently right now, there is three programs that are listed for funding or for entrepreneurship: women, Indigenous, and Black, which are all valuable. Don't get me wrong. I am not trying to underscore them at all. But what about, and I hate to say this term, but what about me? I served as well. I served 32 years. I served my country honorably, but I don't have the same accesses to those special programs that other demographics do, and I think that is wrong. I think that we are, for whatever reason, we are leaving out some very reputable talent from doing something very special.
Thank you, Mr. McNish. I'm going to turn to Mr. Mitic. I've got less than a minute. Same issue. Access to capital. Your business is certainly distinguishable from Mr. McNish's in that it's exclusively an online operation. It being an online operation, you having an interesting and varied career, did you face challenges with respect to access to capital that you felt were associated with your service?
Thank you for the question. When I first started, I asked about access to loans as a veteran, new business owner, and was told there was none. I went, even the Development Bank of Canada, I asked, they said they didn't have anything like that. I didn't even realize, as Richard pointed out, there were funding available on the VAC website. So thus far, I've used all my own money so far. And we are planning to go bricks and mortar this year, all again under our own funding. I'm hoping one day that I will run into someone somewhere who will be able to say, this is how you can access capital if you need it, and they'll help me get there. I think I may have, but as far as veteran-centric funding or capital available, thus far, I haven't found any either.
Sorry, Mr. Mitic. I do have the clock in front of me, and I have to interrupt you. I sincerely apologize. Just for our member, Madame Gaudreau will be addressing you in French, so make sure that the language on your mic is appropriate. Pour 6 minutes, Madame Gaudreau.
Madame Gaudreau, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. And now I just want to speak a little bit to make sure you can hear me through the interpretation. So I believe that in the report, what will be important is to emphasize certain gaps where, unfortunately, you weren't recognized or acknowledged in the way that you should have been in order to be able to have access to a complementary element of support. Because I'm saying that we can help younger people who don't have any capital. We can help people from diversity groups, the Indigenous people, and all of those. That can be modulated quite quickly. But, Madam Chair, I have to add this, Madam Chair. We were talking about the pandemic. Before being an MP, I was an ordinary citizen. And try to launch a business with no capital, to go to all kinds of banks and organisms. They say, just keep going. You have to be perseverant. Because if you, even if you do, you'll hit a lot of obstacles. And there I asked myself the question, in order to be an entrepreneur, there are specific characteristics of the personality that are needed. It's hard. We talked about the pandemic. My centre closed right at the beginning. I almost went bankrupt as an MP. And we shouldn't minimize anything, but it's important. We could talk about seniors who, when they go past a few $1,000s in income, they're no longer receiving their pension to which they contributed for decades. So I don't want to minimize anything, but what it's important to know at this point, it's what is the essence that allows you to dedicate all of your energy to develop your business without hitting all kinds of obstacles. So are you being punished or are you not being rewarded enough? So I'm asking the question to both witnesses. Maybe Mr. McNish first.
Of, I don't want to say punishment because it's not a punishment, but it is a disadvantage. I'm really not, honestly, I don't know what to really say. You just got to push through it. If it's your passion, it's something you want to do, you just got to keep going and you find your ways to do it with the limitations that you have. I don't think that anybody's the $20,000 clawback that Jody mentioned. That's a punishment. Like that's an absolute punishment. If you become successful, we're going to claw that money away from you. There's creative ways around that, but shouldn't be the norm. So yeah, that's all I really can add to that.
Merci. Monsieur.
Thank you. Mr. I'm looking for your name here. Mr. Mittick. Thank you.
Si on compare, Madame la Présidente, je vais mettre une pause. Hein?
So I'll just have a little pause here. If we compare, we look at the whole entrepreneur population. There are some very young people. There are people who hit obstacles. For you, what was the treatment that you were given? Is it something that limits you to the point that you would say that you're being punished or that you're not sufficiently acknowledged in terms of your accomplishments and skills?
Like Richard said, I don't think it's a punishment. I think it's a terrible oversight. I honestly have yet to really seek much help from Veterans Affairs. I did manage to do the Prince's Trust entrepreneur workshop in Newfoundland, as well as access some of their resources virtually online to help. But there's no, and I'm not saying I need encouragement or I need a cheerleading squad or anything, but, a little bit more of a can-do attitude would be helpful when seeking, I'm trying to restart my life with this business and this brand. And, there's not, as Richard kind of pointed out, there's no real acknowledgement. There's, that I've seen, maybe there is in other corners. It just seems that it's a barrier that doesn't need to be there.
Comme il me reste juste 30 secondes, je l'ai arrêté.
Then I just have 30 more seconds. I'll stop when I have to repeat. I think I have the right to have as much time as everyone. We acknowledge that we have 2 official languages. The next question that I'll ask for my next turn, you can think about it, is what about everything that you saw from the day of the end of your service and the kind of coaching or the support you got until the beginning of your business succeeding, and there's something to do. So you just stop. There's a rule. Your service ends, but there can be accommodation. I'd like to hear what you have to say that on my next turn. Thank you very much, Ms. Gaudreau. So think about this, dear witnesses, for the next round. And now we'll move to the second round of witnesses.
Madam Chair, and I'd like to start off by thanking both our witnesses for your service and Mr. Middick. I don't know if you've ever been to the House of Commons, but the coffee here is really bad. So, I know we were talking about free samples from Mr. McNish, but if you want to see better production out of your government, I think we could have better coffee here. And anyways, I've gone online to look at your. Yeah, thank you. I got a round of applause from my colleagues.
For the new procurement rule.
Yeah, new procurement rule. Yeah. Here's a couple of things that I'd like to cover. Mr. Middick, you mentioned about green collar, and you said that it didn't matter, you didn't care what you served, what your qualifications were. But then I hear Mr. McNish having barriers with respects to access to capital and support. I'd like for you to touch on that, Mr. McNish. And I know it's a very delicate subject, but I think we need to have some honest answers for this committee about the challenges. If Mr. Middick doesn't care and just looks at you because you've served, shouldn't we be doing the same thing for veterans?
Easy answer is yes.
Okay.
You should be doing the same. A veteran's a veteran. The definition doesn't change because of background or service record or whatever. You're a veteran. So everybody should have equal opportunity, and Veteran Affairs Canada needs to, like I mentioned earlier, needs to recognize that entrepreneurship is a transition. It is a means to a new life. There is more out there than going to school and being retrained. Veterans, whether you were a private or a full colonel or the Chief of Defense Staff, you have skills that have been developed that work and transfer over, and they need to be utilized and fostered and grown. Like, allow them to do it.
So then my next question is do you believe that Veterans Affairs interferes with the quality of your life afterwards? My belief is that if you've served and you're entitled to benefits, you should be able to access them. But it seems to be that from the witnesses that we hear, that if you make a certain amount of income, you don't qualify for those benefits that you should qualify for. Mr. Middick, I'd like your thoughts on that first.
Thank you for that. Sorry, what's the question, sorry?
So the question would be accessing. So, if you're entitled to benefits, it seems to be that you're restricted based on your income. Benefits are there to provide for the challenges that you faced, and that should be your base. And then if you make an income on top of that, my belief is you should be able to do that. But it seems to be the other way around. Benefits seem to be, well, you know what, you make that certain amount of income, so we don't have to really pay you for the damages that your body's gone through, the emotional toll.
Well, I agree that, it is a discouragement, and, calling it a benefit, again, in my opinion, is a mislabel. When it was implemented, roughly 2018, 19, 20, I can't remember, they called it a pension for life. So I just kind of forgot about the deposits because I assumed it was for life. And it wasn't later on till the administration caught up to me and asked me, prove that you didn't make too much money, because that was their only concern, was that I was making too much money for their files. It's a very unusual process. I questioned it when I heard about it a long time ago. What's the point of this? If it's a pension for life, if it's a payment I've earned losing pieces of my body to high explosives, why would anyone care about a piece of paper? Never mind whether I'm making money or not. This is an income I'm counting on for, if I don't work again for the rest of my life. I've had a few jobs. I've made a few bucks here and there. But, for me, The center issue is that, as I said, when the new Veterans Charter came in, my injuries lost all their financial support that I would have received for the rest of my life. And I was allowed to make money or not make money as much as I wanted with that system. And to me, the core of my argument and my feeling is that I should be receiving a minimum amount of money per month from the government for my service injuries, for life, and everything else I can do on top of that is good for me. And I don't see why Veterans Affairs should be involved in any way but to encourage and support me. I don't need a cheerleading squad. I don't need the red carpet rolled out. I can take care of myself for the most part. But
I agree.
This money, it is an acknowledgement of what happened, and it is quite frustrating to have someone take it because I decided to go out and make a few bucks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, there you go. I would like to now Mr. D'Entremont for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, to Mr. Midyk and Mr. McNish. Thank you so much for your service. And again, thank you so much for being here today to help us, try to unravel a little bit of the questions that we have on entrepreneurship in of course, Veterans Affairs. When you were speaking of your business, I mean, you talked about, you already had the business in a way, that you were already doing some probably brewing with your son prior to your retirement. Did that make it easier or harder? I'm getting, by the sound of it, it made it a little harder. But I find a lot of military members actually have a little bit of a side gig. Some have a second job, some have a little business. My brother had a little store that he was running in Petawawa when he was there. So how often does this happen, and did it cause a bit of a challenge in your transition?
Personally, it didn't create a challenge. It actually helped the transition. It was 100% helpful because I had something to go to. I have friends right now who are sitting in Petawawa who are scared to release from the Canadian Forces because they don't know what they're going to do with themselves. If you give them that olive branch, that opportunity, they will take it. And it's more than just them. So it 100% helped me.
Is it something that we should be conscious with during service, or is it something that we bring up during transition? So during service, I mean, I know there's a lot of things being concentrated towards the mission and the duties that you have on base, and if you get a ship to forward, or whatever that is. But would it be advantageous to have some kind of entrepreneurship programming for military members?
Yeah, I believe that if there's access to something, I don't want them to have to sit through another computer-based training. But if they voluntarily are looking for that, I think it should be before the transition starts. Because once the transition starts and they've made that decision, they've woke up the Friday morning in June and said, that's it, I'm done, like I feel it, and they write the memo, I think that should already have been in place so they have something to go to, not worry about transitioning, trying to figure out their life post, and then trying to learn about or get educated on entrepreneurship. That should be something that if the individuals, because not everybody's an entrepreneur, 100%, some people want to be re-educated, and that is perfectly fine. But I think the ones that are really, really interested in entrepreneurship, they should have that opportunity for training or some kind of development before they make that transition decision.
Your suggestions recognize entrepreneurship, a dedicated entrepreneurship program, enhancing. That's my writing, so I sort of made it quickly when you're making your points. Literacy, and I think that's internal literacy within VAC of what entrepreneurship actually is. Providing flexibility with transition. So you were talking about timing, how long the transition might happen, and then red tape reduction probably is the last. There's a lot of red tape involved in this. But you didn't talk about access to capital. You didn't talk about, maybe networking, some of those other items. Where would you like to see some of these things plugged in?
I think if there's access to funding in a specific stream, that would be highly helpful. I believe that I did mention veteran-specific mentorship, so I as well, like Mr. Middick, went through at the time it was Princess Trust Entrepreneur Boot Camp, now the King's Trust. They don't work with veterans anymore, unfortunately, but that program was outstanding, and I did follow on with a mentorship in there. But those mentors aren't veterans. They don't understand. And to be perfectly honest with you, some of them are volunteering, and they're very good people, but they're looking for a check in the box on their resume. And they're helpful to an extent, but they don't understand our challenges. They don't understand who we are or where we've been.
I know I would probably have some more questions for Mr. Middick, but I don't have enough time. I see the chair cutting me off. So,
Thank you very much. You may get that star today, Mr. D'Entremont. Pour 2 minutes et demie, Madame
For 2.5 minutes, Madame Gaudreau. 2.5 minutes, I repeat. Yes, if everything goes well. So I'm coming back to my question. It's fundamental, and you've just mentioned it. I need to be accompanied, supported at the end of the service, but not by anybody, and especially not by a computer, but by someone who can understand what I've experienced during all my years of service in order to help me to go through the transition to civil society and to be there with me for as long as I need it. Is that the basic issue? And of course, there are other issues, administrative and monetary. But are we on the right point? Because I'd like to hear you, because I have a minute left. Mr. McNish?
Veteran-centric programming with veteran people that know the background, that would be very helpful. Not forced on individuals, but an opportunity to individuals to voluntarily look and teach that out.
Et Monsieur Mittick?
And Mr. Mittick?
I think yes, of course, anything that would help someone transition would be extremely useful. I understand, there's a lot of other demographics in the world and things like that, but as veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces, we are a particular group of people, and the biggest thing would be to try and support it and to try and encourage it if we can. That would be my basic comment.
OK.
Thank you.
Bien, tu vois, j'ai sauvé mon temps.
I saved some time, but I'm being vigilant because I don't have the screen in front of me, but I'm thinking about Mr. McNish. It's flashing. It's not good for concentration. So if the technical people can maybe turn that off, especially when there's interpretation. I don't know how you're managing, but maybe that screen could be turned off. And I'm done. Thank you, Ms. Gaudreau. We will ask our technical team to have a look. Thank you for being vigilant in taking care of our witnesses.
Pass the floor to Mr. Viersen, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank our witnesses for being here as well. It's an interesting thing that entrepreneurship across over the last decade has plummeted from about 3 people per 100,000 or per 1,000 to 1 per 1,000. Do you think some of the challenges that you're facing, are they perhaps just kind of what the whole country is facing in terms of entrepreneurship challenges, and not necessarily specific to veterans? Or what would be a particularly veteran challenge? Because it's an interesting thing that the CBC is reporting that entrepreneurship is quite a bit down over the last 10 years. Mr. McNish.
Well, for the veterans specifically, there is no programming for them, so they're not going to take that leap unless they've got some kind of backing or, other kind of supports. For the average individual going through the transition center on any base garrison in Canada, that's not an option for them. So then that blocks them out, and unless they've started something with their spouse previously, so they could be employed. I don't know, but I don't think it's just veteran specific for that particular statistic, but there is no support out there directly for veterans to increase that statistic either.
Thank you. Mr. Matic?
I thank you. I'd echo what Richard just said. It's in some ways, and I think it's fair to say that everyone is in the same boat with veterans included. For me, it's the fact that we're here to discuss the future of veterans, and that we're regardless of what challenges veterans may be facing in entrepreneurship or anything, it's beneficial for Veterans Affairs to seek ways to help us achieve and be successful, regardless of anything else, because that's a success story. Like Richard's business being around for however many years, that's success. My company, once we get going, it'll be a VAC success story, a veteran success story, et cetera. So the barrier to entrepreneurship getting lower might just be an indication of the overall picture in the country. But as far as veterans are concerned, I think you give us a little bit of support, and you watch us fly. We're pretty resilient group of folks.
Just around doing comparisons to other countries, Australia, the United States, it feels to me, and maybe you have a perspective on this as well, it just feels to me that it's, particularly the United States, veteran-owned business is like a big, you hear that all the time. It feels like the banks seem to have like a dedicated program for veterans down there. Do you see that in the United States, and what's your experience, say, dealing with Canadian banking? I know if you have a university degree, that'll lower your like interest rate and things like that. Does veteran do similar, or is that something the whole system fails to recognize? So, Mr. Matic first, and then Mr. McNish.
Thank you. I would say the Americans have it figured out. They take care of their troops. They take care of their veterans through the banks, through associations, through community charities, the whole gambit. And they take care of each other very well. I'm not saying Canadians don't take care of us ourselves, but we do have our challenges. Like I said, I originally went to my bank. I went to BDC. I went to a few other places, and no one had a veteran-specific lending program, so to speak. I approached a few not-for-profits or charities, and it was a wishy-washy situation. Like, what if the business fails? What if that? So
I only got 30 seconds left, Mr. McNish.
I don't have any experience with the American system, but I do know just from research and talking to others, like Jody said, they have it down. Canada, veterans are good and something to work with when they're in the media, when something positive is in the media. We're at war in Afghanistan. As soon as the war ended,
Did the banks, any bank, ever recognize?
No.
Veterans?
The only bank that recognizes veterans is the Bank of Montreal, only because they have a paid partnership with Department of National Defense, or the Canadian Forces Morale and Welfare System.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will, 5 minutes, Mrs. Erdl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Happy to have you with us. I'd like to come back to the kind of transition period and the experience you had with VAC. The whole point behind this study is to come up with some new ways of thinking. How do we make it better? How do we help the experience for people coming along after you? So you talked about entrepreneurship not being listed as a viable option when you were going through your transition period. I'm wondering, would there be value in there being a veteran on staff at VAC that has entrepreneurial experience, acting as a kind of business coach to introduce the idea and to provide some coaching. Mr. McNish?
Yes, and I believe that there is somebody there now, currently, very recently, Christine Connolly, if I remember her name correctly. I don't want to, but I do believe that she's an entrepreneur herself, and she now works in VAC, and she's starting a program, which I was just at a conference at the University of Ottawa in the fall, because they've started a new program as well that VAC will pay for under a short course. So yes, I think that more embedded individuals within VAC that are veterans that have that V beside their name, and even more that have a V with an entrepreneurial background, 100%.
Okay, Mr. Middick?
Definitely, I would agree with that. You know, and if Veterans Affairs went looking for individuals to help out, I'm sure there are plenty of other veterans who are entrepreneurs that would be happy to get involved. You know, and I have had some help with other veterans helping. You know, they've mentored me and they've given me a lot of advice, and we do lean on each other quite a bit. But a dedicated individual at VAC would probably help things along quite a bit.
Okay, thank you. In a previous study this year, we've heard from people that it would be helpful to have information from VAC possibly earlier, more than a few months before they're leaving service. Would entrepreneurship as an option being introduced maybe 6 or 12 months before you are discharged, would that be of benefit, to have time to maybe do some business planning and do some research and figure out what the pros and cons would be? Mr. McNish?
Yes. So right now, the Canadian Armed Forces has a program called SCAN, the Second Career Assistance Network, which they run a couple of times a year. It's by the Base Personnel Selection Officers. That basically, they call it a Second Career Assistance Network, but that's a sham name because there's no career in there. They talk about medical releases, they talk about pension, they talk about, you know, all these different programs, but they don't talk one thing about a second career, and they don't talk anything about entrepreneurship. VAC will get up there. When I released in October of 2022, part of my clearing out and transition was a talk to a VAC case manager. It was a 5-minute phone call asking me if I had a MyVAC account, and that was it, literally. So everything that I've done post-release, I've done on my own, through my own network, where I've learned things, understood things, and had to go out and look at stuff.
Okay. Mr. Middick, similar experience?
My experience when I transitioned was a little different with my injuries and stuff. I don't recall it ever coming up. I released in 2014. And it was never brought up at the time, to be honest.
Okay, thanks. And then in the minute I have left, I think you've both mentioned networks. That, you know, I know that there isn't one kind of veterans entrepreneurial network out there. There are a handful of them, I gather. Would there be benefit in some kind of organized official network for veteran entrepreneurs? And how would that look like?
Thank you. Yes, I believe that there would be. I think if Veteran Affairs somewhere assisted, supported, I know that there is a veteran out there that has just recently created a veteran entrepreneur network, BNI, I believe it's called. Like, don't quote me on that. And I believe that he's an upcoming witness in this committee at some point. So there is things like that out there, but they're all regionally centric. The NCR has a lot of resources. The Ottawa Valley has 0 resources. If you go to southwestern Manitoba, because you retired out of Shiloh, there's nothing for you. You are in no man's land. You might as well be in the middle of the Sahara.
And I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Right.
Yes, you are, but thank you very much. So this would be concluding our first panel, and I want to say on behalf of our committee, thank you very much to both of you for your service. Thank you for coming to share with us some of the challenges, but also your success. Certainly, I was following a little bit of my phone here, and I do believe from a coffee perspective, Jody, if you go on what they call brick and mortar, some member of our committee would love to go and drink coffee at your location. So just keep us informed. I'm sure many of us will do the ride. And certainly Mr. McNish, from a brewery perspective, I think it's also good that we're aware that you're very close by. So to both of you, thank you again, and we'll be suspending to say proper goodbye.
Thank you.
Chavez for our second hour from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Mr. Brandon Dick and Justin Garot. You both will have 5 minutes, and then we will open the floor for our Member of Parliament to ask questions. So the floor is yours, Mr. Dick, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to address you all today. My name is Brandon Dick, and today I'm representing the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. The IBW Canada currently represents 70,000 active and retired members in various industries ranging from utilities, construction, transportation, telecommunications, government, and national defense. Canadian Armed Forces veterans starting businesses can face skill gaps and limited specialized support. However, their leadership, discipline, and technical skills are highly valuable to the electrical industry and Canada's economy. A significant barrier to entrepreneurship is a lack of industry-specific technical training. Central to our strategy is an enduring partnership with Helmets to Hard Hats Canada. This collaboration provides veterans with access to Red Seal apprenticeships. But for the aspiring entrepreneur, a job isn't enough. They need a path to ownership that starts once completing an apprenticeship and becoming a journeyed electrical worker. Apprenticeships range from the power line technicians with one of our publicly owned electric utilities to the industrial electrician that builds major infrastructure projects. Network cabling specialists are also in demand to help build data centers and keep our major institutions and communities connected to each other during major crises such as windstorms, wildfires, or ice storms. By working alongside our signatory contractors and joint training centers, we're all teaching veterans all the tools of the trade. We're teaching them how to bid on contracts, manage payroll, and scale up an electrical contracting firm by utilizing our National Workforce Dispatch System. Also, with the federal government's Union Training and Innovation Fund, we can further upskill veterans to keep up with an ever-evolving trade. We recognize that entrepreneurship is a marathon and not a sprint. Our commitment to supporting veterans transitioning to civilian life is demonstrated through our Veterans Caucus. It serves as a cornerstone of our outreach, providing a peer-to-peer mentorship network that is crucial for successful integration into the electrical trade and the union community. We can advocate for better on-the-ground support for veterans, meeting them where they live and work. Through our local unions, we ensure veterans starting businesses receive community support, including a network of brothers and sisters ready to offer local expertise and their first contract. A green economy is the next great mission for Canada. With the recent implementation of the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credits, there's a massive demand for electrical contractors, and we're positioning veteran entrepreneurs to lead this charge. Finally, we cannot speak of Canadian entrepreneurship without centering Indigenous participation. Many of our veterans are Indigenous, and they face the double burden of systemic barriers. IBW local unions are actively partnering with Indigenous groups to ensure the veteran-led businesses are not just in the city, but in the North and in First Nations communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dick. Mr. Garot, for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm honored to be invited to speak with you today on behalf of my veteran comrades. My name is Dustin Garrow. I'm a brother of the IBW, I'm a veteran, and I'm a current serving member of the Canadian Armed Forces. I've been serving with them since 2009, and I currently serve with 49th Field Regiment out of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. It's been an honor to serve my country. I'm here to discuss this committee's purpose of identifying barriers that veterans face in entrepreneurship. In 2022, I started my own business in electrical contracting, and I united my business with the IBEW and their constitution. It's well known that starting a small business requires access to capital and funding resources. During the startup and initial growth of my business, funding allocated towards veteran entrepreneurship by the Canadian government was inaccessible. Business startup funding programs exist for numerous other demographic groups, but are non-existent for veterans. RegForce members, upon the release from the CAF, can access an education and training benefit program. However, this funding cannot be used directly towards business startups and growth costs, which creates a significant barrier to a veteran to start their own business opportunity. This is specific to me being a reservist. With a countrywide shortage of personnel in the armed forces, there's more pressure placed on each member to fulfill more than their standard duty. The time and mental strain this requires of both regular and reserve force personnel takes away from home life and alternate career possibilities. With the current crisis state of force staffing, being able to balance the time commitment requirements of a young business and the expectations of a part-time service members is truly a feat. As stated above, programs focused on veteran entrepreneurship funding are inadequate and non-existent. Every member of the Canadian Armed Forces sacrifices significant amount of personal time and energy in service to their country. Their personal growth of owning their own business should be celebrated and supported by the Canadian government. All reasonable career paths of veterans after release should be supported with fair and equal access to funding programs. Entrepreneurial career paths should be supported at the same level as retraining programs and can be funded with the goal of supporting veterans in obtaining or creating a sustainable income outside of the CAF. Removing the initial barrier of access to funding would assist all veterans on the path to starting and owning a successful business and supporting their local community and economy. Thank you all for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garreau, and thank you for your service to our country. We will now start our first round of questions with 6 minutes, and I will invite Mrs. Wagenthal for 6 minutes.
Exactly 6 minutes. Hi, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. We're talking about entrepreneurs and the opportunity for veterans, and there's from the testimony we've heard, when our veterans transition, it's a process. And I'm just wondering if you can share with me, because many that we talk to, it takes them about a decade after service, a lot of them especially that have served, overseas or whatever and have some challenges, to process through all of that and get to where they're able to be the entrepreneur that they have within themselves. How did you find the process for you? You're still serving?
Yeah, so personally, the time commitment was the hardest part. To be a reservist, you give up a lot of your, I'd like to say it's free time, but it's time spent with my family that I don't get, right? When most people are spending their summers in the Muskokas or on a boat kicking up their feet somewhere, reservists are training, spending their summers away from their families. So there's not a lot of time for self-improvement, especially if you're trying to work a full-time job while also working part-time with the reserves. So I found it was just difficult to get the allocated time, because it's not like in the Reg Force where you get out of the Reg Force and then there's a transition period where you have payment that helps you to move into what you want to do. Reserves, it's just kind of, here you go, figure it out.
Whole story, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
in comparison to what we're studying. Okay. You mentioned, Mr. Dick, that you work with Helmets to Hard Hats. I wrote them down right here at the top before you even started speaking. So appreciate that whole initiative. So how exactly do you engage the veterans, and do they work through that whole Red Seal apprenticeship program and then have the opportunity to participate in Helmets to Hard Hats, or is that part of the process?
From what I understand at this point, generally, Helmets to Hard Hats is recruiting, and then they'll find a local union in order to start an apprenticeship.
Okay. So you talked about a marathon. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. I once started a business myself when I was very young. And in order to start that business at that time was installing high-speed internet. I received a small loan for $10,000 at the time. This is back in 2000. And that was to buy a vehicle, ladders, tools. But to be able to grow from that into a larger business, it takes plenty of time, it takes a lot of liability, it takes a lot of time away from your family. Any assets that you might have personally have to get poured back into that business, which of course is another stressor.
Okay, so from a veteran's perspective, having just gone through that transition that you're talking about, Dustin, that isn't the same for you. We've been studying that process for a decade now, actually longer than that. And there isn't a clear approach to that. And the individuals that testified just before you who have their small businesses. One of them made it clear that what they need is flexibility in transition timelines. So do you have any stats on, as far as those that are engaging, where across the country are they? How do they find out? Or are you guys basically a service for helmets to hard hats? They do the work of finding the veterans and then you engage them?
First off, I'll clarify, I'm not a veteran myself.
Yeah, I understood that.
But as far as the timelines are concerned, Helmets to Hard Hats are providing us with those veterans who want to transition into the trade. And then that local union will then take them through the specific training centers that we have. So each local union has a training center that they're partnered with that will provide them with the apprenticeship training or place them into a public sector post-secondary institution that is providing the Red Seal training.
Okay. So the Red Seal training, we've heard from a lot of veterans that they do an awful lot of education while they're serving, but what they have, even though there's a lot of similarities, they don't have anything when they come out. It's basically the expectation is that you now start working on, although they've been electricians, they've done various roles and have had to do the work to get the ability to do those jobs. So is there any room for transfer over of education so that they aren't coming out and having to start at the very beginning, or is that just a given that they have to because it's a union dynamic? And
yeah, definitely. A lot of our training centers will have a skills gap assessment, or they'll have like a pre-apprenticeship training program to get into the trade to make sure that they understand the tools and the basic requirements and to ensure that that is something that they want to pursue. This only not just makes sure that we have high completion rates and that we're qualifying people out that are really interested in the trade. So I think a lot of those skills that are learned within the armed forces will set them up for success later on.
so can you give us any idea of how many have gone through that program that you're working with them on in the various fields of construction and electrical and whatnot, actual veterans and where they are from across Canada?
Unfortunately, no. No, I don't have that information on the top of my head now.
No, not on the top of your head, but could you supply it?
We could find it, yeah.
Thank you.
Provide it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate. We will now ask Madame Dandurand pour 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes.
Whatever you call it in English. Merci beaucoup d'abord d'être là. Et,
thank you for being here, and thank you for coming to speak to us about this important moment of transition of veterans to civil life. Mr. Garot, you're an electrician in civil life. Was that also your job in the armed forces? Can you hear the interpreter?
In the civil life, are you also an electrician in the army?
No, in the military I was a weapons technician until I was promoted warrant officer, and then in the REME trade you change over to a land equipment engineering technologist. It's a whole thing.
Okay, so totally different.
Yeah, so while I was training with the military in the summers, I was simultaneously working on my apprenticeship when I was not training with the military for electrical, and then kind of got qualified for both things around the same time.
So I don't know if you have colleagues that are formerly working in electrics and doing that, but my line of questioning is mostly like, is there any recognition of your work? Like this is union work to be an electrician. So is there kind of a pathway to recognize the knowledge that you have from the army to the civil life?
Absolutely, there is. But it's very niche, very limited. So, for example, my trade is part of the Royal Canadian Electrical Mechanical Engineering branch, the REME branch, and part of that is we get a little bit of electronics, a little bit of electrical, depending on what trade you are. If you're an electronics and optics technician, you're very specialized in electronics, and a lot of that is transferable skills to electrical. I believe in the Air Force there is a electrical technician trade, and that's pretty much hour for hour for electrician. So it depends what trade you are, but it's not always transferable. It depends what it is.
So generally speaking, do you think it's quite easy to have the knowledge or competency recognized for union work, or it's a hurdle for?
For the IBW, it was pretty easy. They recognize that there is some transferable skills, but I can't say that for every union, and I can't say that for every employer.
So what help was it from the union to help you go to? So can you characterize how they helped you?
So I wouldn't so much say that the union helped me with my business. It was more so I tapped into the union because I was already a union brother. I believe in the system that they have set up in place. I believe in the quality of life they have for their employees. And when I became an employer myself, I wanted my employees to have the same quality of life. So I bought into the union because I was already part of the union.
Just maybe from your perspective, both of you, do you think that we in Canada are using the full potential of veterans as entrepreneurs?
I believe that Canada is, through the forces, is training some of the best leadership and best managerial staff that you could possibly have. I'm a warrant officer in the military, and so I've done multiple levels of leadership training, managerial training, and I take a lot of that I've learned and I apply it directly to my business. So I feel like there's an untapped market that Canada is missing out on by not maybe promoting the ability to be an entrepreneur with Canadian Forces.
Mr. Dick?
Yeah, I think that's an easy one. There's a lot of skills that I know. Being an international union, what we've seen is our military forces from the United States, the power line technicians that come out of the armed forces are very skilled, provide a lot of our membership in the States and do a lot of community rebuilding after some of these major impacting storms. So I think for us in Canada versus what I've seen south of the border, it's definitely an untapped resource for us.
So how can we better use the skill sets that they have? What is the type of framework that we should have? And is it from unions like you, like outside of the government? Or what's your perspective on that?
I certainly think that a partnership with government, building trades unions have already proven that we partner well with government through very minimal financial resources. We're able to support workers, whether or not they're veterans, but if to have that specific experience of veterans supported by each other, like what we've done with that Veterans Caucus, absolutely. I think we can do a great job by being a force multiplier for the government.
Merci.
Do I have any time left? No, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Dandurand. Now we will start the second round of questions.
Excuse-moi, pardon, j'ai encore fait la même erreur.
Oh, I'm sorry, I made the same mistake. So for 6 minutes, Ms. Gaudreau. No, it's fine. So I even asked myself the question. Now I'm going to be speaking like this. I want to make sure that you can hear the interpretation. Is the sound loud enough? Before it wasn't loud enough. So I would like to know more about who you are. What are you proud of for people who are watching us and for people who need models like you? I'd like to hear you say that.
I'm definitely proud of the time I spent with the military, the friends I made, the experiences I've been through. honestly helps shape a lot of my life and a lot of my decisions. The morals and ethics that the Canadian Forces instills upon its members is an invaluable resource. And that's why I molded my business around a lot of the same ethics and ethos that they teach. I'm trying my darndest to hire more veterans in my business. We currently have 3 veterans on staff, and I'm trying to hire more. So it's up to the union to allow me to be able to bring more of them in, but we'll see how that goes.
I'd say as a union member, very proud of the programs that we have to support workers, to enhance health and safety, and it overlaps very well with the ethics of the armed forces. So it's and the limited interactions I've had over the last couple of years with our veterans and the Veterans Caucus, I'd say it's a great fit for being a part of the community, and that production mindset and being of service, which I think is also fits very well within the unionized building trades.
On entend parler à plusieurs reprises.
Have heard several times that there's nothing better than someone who has been in the armed forces. And now the two of you are there. So it's interesting to know, Mr. Garreau, you're experiencing this from the inside, but you've also experienced being mentored by people like Dick who were not in the military. So how did you feel? Because between brothers in arms, there are things that one will have experienced, and there's also the prosperity of the union, even though you didn't have any service.
Very similar to the military. Even down to their union meetings. It's held the exact same way we would hold our mess committee meetings. It's identical. It kind of freaked me out the first time I was at one. But it's a brotherhood. I say brotherhood, but obviously we have sisters and other members as well. But that esprit de corps, that morale of being around like-minded individuals that want to do something that's meaningful and build something that hasn't been built before, and basically relying on each other. It's foundationally, it's the exact same as the military. So that's why it was an easy sell for me to unionize my own business. Like, not many employers do that. I got some weird looks when I did it, but it's working out pretty good for me. So I'm pretty happy with the decision. And yeah, like I said, the IBW's a very good place for veterans.
As far as any additional comments, Dustin's put it very well, but it's that capacity that the union provides, not only in workforce, but for additional training. So if there is any upskilling that's required for a specific job, I think that's an important aspect, because this industry is continually changing. So it's that that support network that everyone's putting back into to further grow the industry, but at the same time to build camaraderie, so that there's that everyone becomes stakeholders within the industry as well.
Vous me faites penser à ce qu'on vit au Québec.
Make me think of what we're experiencing in Quebec, and I experienced it over several years on employabilities. We call it hubs or platforms for work, and what we can observe there is collegiality, of finding what is similar to us, and not saying, well, we'll just be veterans because we can only understand each other, but to have the capacity to readjust, to adapt, and to understand others. And what I would like, if you could send us what your good practices are in terms as veterans, what's essential in terms of the mentorship that you offer and that what you are experiencing. And I'm wondering if you could send us this. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I appreciate this. So officially, we'll move to the second round of questions.
So as I've listened to the conversation so far, I sat here and I was thinking, it seems to me like the trades are a perfect fit for veterans, and veterans are a perfect fit for the trades. I guess where that leads me is some questions around how do we ensure that more veterans are aware of the opportunities that there are in the trades, because clearly we need more people in the trades. And there's a lot of veterans out there that I know would like to have something that they could find in their new lives that would give them fulfillment, and the trades could certainly be that. So I guess my questions will be centered around that. How do we make that happen? So maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Dick. You mentioned that you work with Helmets to Hard Hats, and they kind of are a referral source essentially to you guys to sort of help get people started, get veterans started. What role does Veterans Affairs play in that, if any?
I honestly don't know, but I think it could be expanded.
That sounds like that's a problem. Yeah. What role could they play? If we wanted to get more veterans involved, what role could VAC play? Or
I'll put my labor organizer hat on, and I'll say that if we can meet veterans where they're at, if we have the opportunity to talk about what a good union job can provide to veterans while they're transitioning, I think that would be a great opportunity for both the unions to find that workforce, develop that workforce, and talk frankly about the opportunities that they're looking for.
It's really just awareness, making veterans aware of the opportunities that are available to them. That's kind of what you're? Yeah. Okay. And along that same note, then, Mr. Gurrow, with your business, you said you'd like to offer more veterans opportunities. Would you kind of concur, or would you add anything to that? What could Veterans Affairs do to try and help create those opportunities for more of your fellow veterans?
Honestly, I think a lot of it comes down to transition phases. So let's say you have members releasing, or they know they're going to release, and maybe Veterans Affairs has like a pre-release discussion with them of like, what do you want to do? And if any of them say like, I want to be in the trades or do something with my hands because that's what I enjoy doing in the military, maybe that's where Veterans Affairs already has a predetermined set group of entities like the unions that are already looking for that talent, that would like to, like Mr. Dick said, meet them where they're at and offer them those right off the table. Maybe that just eliminates a whole bunch of issues, like funding issues. I know you have programs in place to establish Reg Force members and continue paying them for a little bit as they transition. But if they go right into a union where they're making good money and good pension and benefits right away, then you wouldn't even need that. So it could actually save the government some money. And it's just those relationships and that networking that needs to happen.
I mean, it sounds like common sense. It sounds like something that could happen pretty easily. It's kind of shocking to think that it isn't already happening, right? So obviously that needs to be something that we make a recommendation. You mentioned you are, in addition to being obviously a veteran yourself, you are employing a couple of other veterans already, I think you said. Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess for yourself, for those other veterans that are working with you or other friends that you have, anything you want to tell us in terms of your experience with Veterans Affairs, whether it's related to kind of getting involved in the trades or starting a business, or otherwise, if there's some issues that you've encountered or know of others have encountered that you think should be fixed or improved, this is an opportunity, I guess, for you to tell us what.
Yeah. So, I guess one of my apprentices, he was regular force vehicle technician for 12 years, and kept hurting himself all the time because working on big trucks, you end up smashing your head or smashing your back and, bumps and bruises all the time. And I know he tried to put in some VAC claims for head injuries and stuff, and he expressed to me that it was difficult sometimes to get through that process. Like, it's almost like you have to hit very specific guidelines to qualify for the VAC program. So maybe if that was looked at and reviewed, maybe open that up a little bit, that maybe that could help a lot of the members coming out. and then it would be easier for them to figure out what they want to do.
I think that makes a lot of sense as well. Was I getting a signal that was it? Okay. All right. Well, I guess the next question is now irrelevant. That hopefully I'll get another opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. For 5 minutes, Mr. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to both of you for being here with us. Mr. Garreau, thank you for your service. Also, thanks to you for meeting with me in my office some months ago, and it was pretty clear early in that conversation that you belonged in this room as part of this study. The nature of tradespeople is one of independence and inherently entrepreneurial. So it's a great fit, and I'm glad you're here, Mr. Dick. Right off the top, you talked about a path to ownership, and now you have an owner sitting beside you. So, Mr. Garreau, I want you to talk about your path to ownership, and if we have time, I'll come back to you about some of the union's programs. So when you were in the forces, if I understand correctly, it wasn't in an electrical trade. So after you discharged, you went through the process of getting your Red Seal?
No, so I'm still currently serving with the military part-time as a
Okay.
reservist. So I've never actually released or transitioned. I was never Reg Force. I've worked full-time contracts for quite a few years and then worked part-time. So I never had to experience that transitional period. I can only speak of friends and employees that did it.
Okay. So you are a business owner employing electricians. How many?
I believe there's about 8 or 9 electricians on staff right now.
All members of IBEW?
IBEW, yeah.
Okay. If you can take me through that path to ownership. How did it come that you went from being involved with the military to becoming a business owner? There had to be something happening in between there.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, I was an electrician, and I was also simultaneously working for the military part-time. The military, like I said, taught me proper ethos, ethics, morals, values, how to treat my people, how to lead people instead of bossing people. That was a big one. And as an electrician, I worked for a lot of other electrical companies. And I seen the opposite of what I seen in the military. And simultaneously, I've seen a lot of failures from those electrical companies because they prioritized their pockets over their employees and their customers. So me just using some common sense said, well, why don't I take what I've learned in the military and apply it to my own business and see how that works out? And that's what I did. I got fed up of working with other contractors. I started working for myself and started employing people the same way I would treat them and care for them if they were working for me in the military. And it seems to be a pretty successful avenue.
I think my last question for you is this. At one point in answer to another question from another member of Parliament, you said it's up to the union as to whether you can hire more. So explain to me the relationship between you and the union and why they would have any say in the growth of your business.
Sure.
So, like the military, the union has a very set guideline, controls, parameters that contractors have to abide by, and that isn't to enforce anything bad. It's literally just to make sure that there's fairness across the board. So one hurdle is that if you want to hire a certain type of individual, like a veteran, well, technically that is going outside of how the union does things, because the way I hire people is I put a call into the local hall and say I need 3 electricians full-time, or I need 3 electricians for the next 6 weeks. Depends on the jobs that I have lined up, right? So they have a seniority, in fairness. When the person gets laid off, they're on the list. As they sit there longer and longer, they rise on that list. and they're the next ones to get called. So to bypass that, the union would have to make some decisions. That's outside of my hands, that's in his hands. Well, not him specifically, but he works for the organization that controls that, so.
Looks like I'm not going to get to you, Mr. Dick. Thank you both for being here.
Says, thank you. Encore une fois, Madame Gaudreau will be addressing me.
Again, Madame Gaudreau.
Ready? Donc, Madame Gaudreau pour 2.5, 2 minutes et demie. Merci.
Madame Gaudreau, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Now that we'll be receiving a description of your best practices and important points, I would like to know if you can demonstrate to me that the fact of being listening for needs and to have support over time makes a huge difference for veterans who are in transition.
Yeah, you mind repeating that a little bit?
Oui. Sans
Without the union, without the network, would you be where you are now, Mr. Garot?
No.
Pourquoi?
So the
Why?
union, I could have been a non-union company, and that would have allowed me to dictate what I pay for pension and benefits and everything. However, being with the union, it's allowed me to tap into tradespeople who are more experienced than you could ever imagine. Guys who have worked on things that just most people never get to work on. I have some of the best qualified technicians in my business than you can find in most places, and I only have like 8 of them. So the union is a very good pool of resources, of manpower, that holds a very high standard for their tradespeople overall. Because if the tradespeople don't hold a good standard, the union doesn't do well. So the union enforces that everybody is a good employee and maintains the standard that they set.
Est-ce que c'est ce que vous constatez pour la plupart?
Is that what you've noticed for most veterans who work with you? Mr. Dick.
We're democratic. So I started even as a representative, I started as a member. And I think that's very similar to the armed forces. You work your way up through the ranks, you prove yourself. We have those constitutional guardrails. We have objectives as well too to our community. So I think that for veterans, the ones that I've met, like they find that camaraderie, like again that overlap, and they see that opportunity. So it's not just about building those technical skills, but those soft skills as well too, and being a part of another community, another broader community, and giving back.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. For now, 5 minutes.
Thank you very
Mrs.
much.
Sorry. Thank you. Okay, so I'm trying to understand this. So you have your own business, you work with the union, but you want to hire veterans. So provincially, like there are labor laws around what you can ask for and not ask for in job descriptions. How did you get the veterans that you do have on staff, and how many are? Three did you say, out of the 8? Or what?
Yeah, so I have staff that aren't exactly electricians. My wife, she is a veteran as well. She does our books and our paperwork. And my apprentice, I brought him into the union with me when I unionized the business. So that's a way to bring people into the union, is as you're unionizing, you bring them in. So the 3 of us, the 3 veterans on staff, that's who I have right now. And I'm trying to be able to get more, but.
So I'm just going to share my time, but one more question there. Helmets to hard hats, is clearly focused on veterans. So how do they get the veterans from the unions when I understand you have a hierarchy as they finish a job, they come back in line? How does that work?
So the union can bring veterans in, no problem, no questions. The stipulations is that me as an employer, I cannot specifically request a certain person based off of their background.
Choose a veteran. You can.
Well, there are certain ways I can hire people. I can name hire 50%. So let's say I hire 10 people, 5 of them I can pick who they are. But I would have to know that they're on the list, and I'd have to know that they're a veteran if I wanted to bring veterans on staff.
So, yeah, so it's a situation where you have to indicate that you want this particular type of person. A veteran.
I'd have to name them by name.
Name them. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So, got some time, Fraser.
You're sharing your time?
Yes, with Mr.
Perfect. Mr. Tomey?
Please.
How much time do I have left? Okay. Thank you very much for your testimonies. Mr. Garreau, I just want to briefly touch, and then I've got a couple other questions afterwards. You talked about you're a reservist, and you said there's obstacles. Obviously, there's obstacles in your own personal time management between, work and then serving. Can you share a little bit more? Is there obstacles in you now having your own business and the challenges, with being a reservist?
There is, but I wouldn't say they would have always been there. It's more of a systemic issue now. Due to the lack of personnel, the Canadian Forces is trying to maintain the same momentum and progress with less people. So unfortunately, especially people like myself in leadership positions, that just means more workload. Well, I still only work the same amount of hours every week. We don't get paid more, no.
Another quick question. You see someone, they're in the military. Do you go, I want to hire you? Do they have to be an electrician? Or are you training them? Because the question is that, you're a unionized shop. There's, the program. So do they have to go through the program, or do they have to, be certified electrician when you're hiring?
So there's kind of 2 answers to that question. I can bring electricians into the hall if I put a call into the hall and they can't fill the call. Then I can hire somebody off the street and bring them into the hall. I just recently did this with somebody 2 months ago. So that answers the first part. The next part is, let's say I find somebody who's not an electrician and I want to bring them in just because they're a veteran, they're a very smart person, they're a hardworking person, they've got good morals, they're exactly what I'm looking for as an employer. Well, unfortunately, I can't name hire apprentices off the street. So at that point, my hands are a bit tied. The best I can do is I can tell them, well, the union hires once or twice a year, apply, hopefully you get in, and then hopefully the stars align, and when I put a call in for a first-term apprentice, I get you.
So that quickly comes to the challenge of where we've had people that exit the military and their qualifications don't line up with civilian standards. Is that an issue, Mr. Dick?
Yeah, it's certainly an issue because, of course, the Red Seal trade is designed to enable portability across the country. So that if the standard at the armed forces level isn't meeting that other national level to go and to build residential, for instance, like there are some skills that will not transfer. However, that's where we can fill those gaps and we can train up those workers. But we also have other trades. We have power line technicians. We have data cabling specialists. So there's other opportunities if that we could potentially put those armed forces members into, those retirees into, to transition their career.
Thank you very much. Now for last 5 minutes on this panel, Mr. D'Entremont.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. I will be.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
It's with Ms. Hurdle. My first question really to, or my first comment to Mr. Garreau, thank you for your service and your continued service as a reservist. I'm thinking if you're running a business and doing some reservist work, what do you do in your spare time?
Yeah.
All kinds of things.
Honestly, every minute I have, I spend with my wife and my 2 children.
So thank you for that. But I know you're a very, very busy person, and I really appreciate that you were here today. And if you ever want to set up a business in Nova Scotia, we need lots of electricians there too. So you're one of those services I think that many of our communities really need. But my questions may basically go to IBEU in this one. We heard a lot in the presentations previously today, and of course on Tuesday or on Monday already, that especially in transition, that veterans are looking for networking, they're looking for pathways, they're looking for an accessibility to entrepreneurship within Veterans Affairs. So really my question to Mr. Dick is really, there's been a lot of investments from VAC into, I think we had some to the Brotherhood affiliated groups, Western Joint Electrical Training Society, the National Electrical Trade Council. There was like $10 million and $3.6 million. So there has been some supports going to some of your organizations. How important is that to continue and try to support veterans in their transitions?
Extremely important. It's that, like I mentioned before, that money we also put in our own resources. We have our own trainers. We have our own facilities. So we take those dollars and we specifically, we've targeted equity-seeking groups to attract women into the trades, young Indigenous in areas where maybe they haven't had those opportunities. And I think we could absolutely do that for veterans as well.
Well, we hear quite often about red tape reduction, so it's complicated in a lot of cases, especially in those transitions. How has IBU and your affiliates have been able to sort of make some of this easy, and Mr. Garreau can sort of comment on how easy was it to do 2 things at the same time?
I'd say there's a lot of red tape to anything business, right? I would say that I would need more experience hiring more full-time people that aren't already in the union to be able to answer that effectively. So.
Maybe to Mr. Dick.
Yeah. When it comes to recruitment, I think we can provide contractors with the workforce that we already have, and in a lot of areas of the country, they're sitting there waiting for work. And the reason for our work lists is to ensure that everybody gets a fair opportunity without skipping the line per se. So, but again, we still want to provide those equity-seeking groups the opportunities that weren't there in the past. So we will make amendments, or we'll make exceptions to share. And especially in those rural areas where I think we're going to have a lot of members that are missing out.
Thank you. I give my time to Ms. Hurdle.
Thank you very much. I'm from Nova Scotia, as well as my colleague, and they're the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency. A few years ago started something called the Blue Seal, which was for individuals who have the Red Seal designation to learn business management skills. Basically, it's a partnership with Department of Labor Skills and Immigration and different service providers. I'm wondering if your organization offers something of that nature, and if not, would that be of value to look at across the country?
We'd certainly like to expand the programs that we do offer, like helmets to hard hats. We've solely partnered with them for our veterans intake at this point. So no, we haven't at this point, but I would be excited to do so.
Yeah. Would that be? I know it would be of value, but do you find that many of the individuals coming in, perhaps as veterans, do they have any of those business management skills, or are they transferable skills from the military that you're able to apply?
I'd say that the leadership skills that veterans bring into the union is where their entrepreneurial skills are rooted. So, and we could definitely harness that, and once they have the technical skills, they would prosper within the union because of that.
Thank you.
How about that?
Very good. Both of you get the gold star. Well, on this would be concluding our time for question. I want to say on our behalf, thank you very much for joining us today. Mr. Goreau, thank you for your service. I can just appreciate how busy you are. Before I release the committee, or I ask to adjourn, je voudrais juste mentionner que notre prochaine réunion
I'd like to say that the next meeting will be on February 9th, 2026 from 11 to 12. We will keep on working on this topic. From 12 to 12:30, we'll have an in-camera meeting with the Canada-Lithuania Friendship Group. The ambassador from Lithuania and Canada will also be there. Would you like to adjourn?